Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and reached a conclusion, but left the public divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth? That's another story. Now, imagine this. It's a typical evening in Queens, New York. A local fruit vendor is tending to his stand, serving customers as they pass by. The hustle and bustle of the city is all around, when suddenly an altercation breaks out. A man previously unnoticed becomes agitated and violent, leading to a shocking and brutal attack. What led to this moment? Could it have been prevented? And who bears the responsibility for the events that unfolded? In this episode, we're diving into the case of Niser Cekic, a man with a long history of arrests and mental health issues, who despite numerous encounters with the law remained free until a tragic incident occurred. This case has sparked intense debate about the intersection of mental health and the criminal justice system. Was this a failure of the system to provide necessary care, or a series of missed opportunities to prevent a foreseeable tragedy? Stick with me here as we explore the complexities of this case and the broader implications it holds for society. As we delve deeper into this case, it's important to understand the background of the individuals involved and the circumstances leading up to this incident. So on November 3rd, just recently in 2024, in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Queens, 47-year-old Niser was found sleeping near a fruit stand at the corner of 59th and Roosevelt. The vendor, a 35-year-old man, approached Niser and asked him to move away from the stand. But what happened next was both sudden and violent. Niser Cekic, upon being wakened, became enraged and attacked the vendor, and he stabbed him multiple times. The victim was rushed to Elmhurst Hospital Center, where he was listed in stable condition. This incident was not an isolated one in Cekic's life. He had been arrested 23 times prior to this attack, with charges ranging from petite larceny to trespassing to criminal possession and bail jumping. Despite this extensive criminal history, he remained free, raising serious questions about the effectiveness of the criminal justice system in handling individuals with repeated offenses and apparent mental health issues. The community's reaction was one of shock and outrage. Many questioned how someone with such a lengthy arrest record could still be on the streets, capable of committing such a violent act. And others pointed to systemic failures in addressing mental health, suggesting that Cekic's actions were a result of an untreated illness rather than mere criminal behavior. Maybe it's both. This case ignited a broader conversation either way about the responsibilities of the criminal justice system, mental health services, and society as a whole in preventing tragedies like this. As we explore this case further, we're going to examine the events leading up to the attack, the responses from law enforcement and mental health professionals, and the ongoing debate about how best to handle individuals like Cekic. Was this a preventable tragedy or the inevitable outcome of systemic shortcomings? Stick with me here as we unravel the complexities of this case and seek to understand where the true responsibility lies. When examining the case of Niser Cekic, we are confronted with a series of challenging questions that delve into the heart of our criminal justice and mental health systems. How does a man accumulate 23 arrests without any significant intervention? At what point does the system recognize a pattern that requires more than just temporary detention? These questions are not just about one individual, but about the structures that are in place that allowed such a situation to persist. Cekic's history of arrests suggests a pattern of behavior that was repeatedly addressed with short-term solutions. Each arrest led to a release, and the cycle continued. This raises the question, are our current legal frameworks equipped to handle individuals who exhibit chronic criminal behavior potentially linked to mental health issues? It's a mouthful, but it is a major question. Is there a point at which the system should intervene more decisively? And if so, what should that intervention look like? Moreover, this case brings to light the intersection of mental health and criminality, and we talk about that a lot here in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. If Cekic's actions were influenced by untreated mental illness, does that shift the responsibility from punitive measures to therapeutic ones? And if so, how do we balance the need for public safety with the rights and needs of individuals suffering from mental health disorders? These questions challenge us to think about the adequacy of mental health services and their integration with the criminal justice system. The attack on the fruit vendor was a tipping point, but the signs were present long before that day. And this leads us to ask, were there missed opportunities for intervention that could have prevented this tragedy? What role do law enforcement, mental health professionals, and community members play in identifying and addressing such patterns of behavior? And perhaps most importantly, how do we prevent similar incidents in the future? As we continue to explore this case, keep these questions in mind. They're central to understanding not only what happened, but also how we as a society can respond to and prevent tragedies like this. The answers are not straightforward, of course, and the implications are far-reaching, affecting policies and practices and perceptions across multiple sectors. But examining this, we have to start somewhere. Now, the case of Niser Cekic, it also forces us to confront the stigma surrounding mental health and its impact on criminal behavior. And we don't look at this enough because it is a stigma. How does society perceive individuals with mental health issues who engage in criminal activities? Is there a tendency to view them solely as offenders? Or do we consider the underlying factors that may contribute to their actions? This dichotomy influences how interventions are designed and implemented. And furthermore, this case raises concerns about the allocation of resources. Are there sufficient programs and support systems in place to assist individuals like Cekic before their behavior escalates to violence? Cekic's story is one of repeated encounters with law enforcement. And as I said, this raises questions about the system's response to individuals with ongoing criminal behavior and mental health challenges as well. Now, by the time this incident happened, just here in November, Cekic had already been arrested 23 times. For many, this cycle of arrest and release highlights a potential gap in how the justice system addresses individuals with chronic legal issues and possible mental health concerns. On the day of this incident, Cekic was found sleeping beside a fruit stand in Queens, New York. When the vendor, a 35-year-old local worker, asked Cekic to move away, this intersection took a violent turn. Cekic became enraged, attacking the vendor, stabbing him multiple times before others could intervene. The victim was quickly taken to the hospital and was fortunate to survive, though the event left the neighborhood shaken. The stabbing brought to light the serious risks associated with recurring offenders who may also have untreated mental health issues. Cekic's criminal record included numerous offenses, and many questioned why previous interactions with the law had not led to more effective interventions. Was there a point when the system could have recognized a pattern and taken preventative action? And if so, what kind of intervention would have been appropriate or feasible in this situation? These are issues that stop this kind of intervention from happening. They're difficult questions to answer. And the response from the public and community leaders they tried to answer, many expressed frustration and concern. They wanted a review of policies that allowed someone with Cekic's history to remain free. How does it happen? Law enforcement officials acknowledged the limitations they face when dealing with individuals whose crimes are typically low level, but they're frequent. Without a severe offense or significant escalation, Cekic's previous arrests didn't really meet the threshold for a prolonged detention or any mental health intervention. This tragic event has since become a case study for systemic challenges, highlighting the need for more integrated approaches that combine law enforcement with mental health resources. The question remains, was this incident an inevitable outcome, or could proactive measures have prevented it? As we continue exploring Cekic's background, it's clear that his interactions with the legal system were frequent, yet seemingly ineffective in addressing the root cause of this behavior in the first place. Many of Cekic's 23 prior arrests involved relatively minor offenses. The trespassing, crimes that typically don't result in a lengthy sentence or any intensive intervention. For some, this history suggests a pattern of behavior tied not just to criminality, but potentially to unaddressed mental health struggles. So if someone is repeatedly doing these smaller crimes, maybe that's the red flag that they need to be looked at as to why they feel like this is a good idea. Cekic's legal record shows a revolving door of these minor charges, and they were all followed by quick releases. And they would be. But the pattern, if it happens in a pattern, that's what this is. The question is, if we see the pattern, shouldn't that be treated differently than an individual small crime problem? Each time he returned to the streets, often without any support or evaluation, might have assessed his needs, might have figured out his mental health struggles, but it wasn't there. And this cycle points to the limitations of a system that can detain an individual temporarily, but they may not have the resources or the policies to provide sustained care for repeat offenders with possible mental health issues. What are the procedures for repeat offenders? Usually we hear about more severe punishment, right? Now, in the case of his latest arrest for this stabbing incident, the stakes finally escalated here. Community members and public figures, they started to question how someone with such a lengthy arrest record could remain at large. And these questions have been asked for a while. Well, many argued that repeated low-level offenses, they should have triggered a different approach here. There were too many of them. Should have triggered a preventative approach that might have included mandated mental health assessments or access to community support services. Yet as the criminal justice system currently stands, as it is today, we're talking November 24, that's right now, guys, it often lacks the mechanisms for this kind of intervention. And then you only can look at it when a serious crime like this is committed. This incident has definitely intensified calls for reform, with advocates arguing that cases like Cekic's are symptomatic of a system that lacks the proactive response to individuals showing signs of chronic behavior. And I want to point out that we talk about this with parents and schools. Why didn't the parents notice and do something about this child, in an example, their behavior of acting out and doing certain things? A lot of times we look to the parents. You saw this happening and you did nothing about it, and now look at this. And we're quick to say that, and we're okay with saying that. But what about society? What about our systems? Law enforcement, mental health support. What are they doing? Are they just as responsible as we want to see a parent be, for example? It's something to think about. Law enforcement, for its part, is limited by current statutes that prioritize responses to specific immediate threats rather than any long-term behavioral patterns. So it's out of their scope to be doing things like this. They are trained to respond to immediate threats. So in other words, until Cekic committed a violent offense, the system's approach was to keep releasing him after every minor infraction. There was nothing in the middle to take notice that it kept happening. Now, in the wake of his attack, the question remains: could a more integrated system, one that connects criminal justice with mental health, have intervened sooner to prevent this incident? For those invested in both public safety and mental health reform, Cekic's case highlights a gap that, if left unaddressed, risks leading to similar tragedies. And this isn't a mystery. It's not as if, we've just realized we can do this. We have known about repeat offenders for a very long time. But what we hear about is harsher punishments. What's the in-between? The prosecution's stance in this case, it's centered on the idea that Cekic's actions were not just impulsive, but dangerous, reflecting a pattern of behavior that had already put the community at risk. They argued that his attack on the vendor wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of years of escalating behavior, unchecked by the system. For prosecutors, the stabbing incident demonstrated that despite his previous arrests, Cekic posed a clear threat to public safety, a threat that required serious consequences in order to prevent further harm. The prosecution presented Cekic's extensive arrest record as evidence that past measures were insufficient to prevent him from committing more serious offenses. They emphasized that his 23 prior arrests, while technically for lower-level crimes, revealed a pattern of disregard for the law. In their view, each previous release had allowed him to continue his behavior unchecked, leading to a situation where, without intervention, a violent outcome was almost inevitable. And if we're dealing with the mentally challenged, how are they going to take those releases? They might take them as, what I did wasn't so bad. And that's what I'm saying here. That's what we're explaining. But the prosecution's case faced a major hurdle, proving that the criminal justice system itself had the tools to manage someone like Cekic, whose actions were partly driven by possible mental health issues. While they could hold Cekic accountable for his behavior, the limitations of the system's preventative measures were apparent. How does one effectively prosecute an individual for failing to receive mental health care they needed? Mental health care that was never provided to them. The prosecution also highlighted that Cekic's actions went beyond what could be attributed solely to mental illness. While his history might indicate struggles with mental health, they argued that his capacity for violence posed a direct danger to those around him, something that in their view demanded accountability, not leniency. They underscored the idea that the victim's life was put at risk due to Cekic's actions, and that this level of harm necessitated a strong response. Ultimately, the prosecution's approach was to focus on public safety, and in their eyes, whether Cekic's mental health was a factor or not. The priority was ensuring that his actions did not endanger others in the future. And they argued that this case was about setting a precedent, protecting the public from individuals who repeatedly demonstrate a risk to society, regardless of the underlying causes. Now, the defense, they approached this case with a focus on Cekic's mental health and his long-standing struggles with behavior that fell just below the threshold of severe legal intervention. They argued that his extensive record was not solely a sign of criminality. It was evidence of a deeper, unaddressed issue with mental health. In their view, Cekic was a man who had repeatedly fallen through the cracks of a system unprepared to address his needs. Was it fair to treat him as a criminal when he'd never received the care that might have helped prevent these actions? In cases like this one, the concept of precedent inevitably comes into play. Niser Cekic's extensive arrest record, combined with the violent nature of his final offense, presents a difficult question. Should his case serve as an example for others in similar situations? For many, this case raises the ethical dilemma of whether one individual's actions should set a broader precedent. Does the need to protect public safety justify treating someone as an example, picking someone out, especially if that person may struggle with mental health issues? Setting a precedent is an extraordinary measure, carrying implications that go beyond the individual and they affect future cases. We hear about it often. Oh, the judge is going to want to set a precedent on this one. And in incidents like this, where mental illness is a suspected factor, we are left asking, is it appropriate to apply precedent without regard to personal circumstance? For some, cases involving mental health concerns highlight the need for a more tailored approach, rather than setting a one-size-fits-all standard. If it were up to any one of us, would we be willing to carry the burden of a case that shapes legal consequences for others? How would you feel about that if it were you? At the heart of the debate of precedent lies a crucial question. Who decides that one person's actions should set a precedent? Like this man's here. In the justice system, judges often make this call, determining that a particular case should serve as an example to deter future crimes. We hear about this often. No one really raises any red flags. It's just so commonplace. But this decision has profound consequences for the actual individual involved, often resulting in a harsher sentence than something someone else might get, even people in the future. So is it fair that one person bears the burden of being the example, determined by a judge, when in similar cases others may receive lighter sentences? When a judge chooses to set a precedent, they're essentially asking one individual to take on a role with broader societal implications. And for some, this raises questions about fairness. Should any one person, especially someone facing challenges like mental illness, be held to a different standard purely because their case could make headlines or send a message? Precedent setting introduces not just accountability, but heavier punishment aimed at creating a deterrent effect, one that may feel disproportionate to the actual circumstances of the crime. For you listeners out there, this may be an uncomfortable concept to even consider. What if you or someone close to you became the example in a case that might otherwise have been met with leniency? And if setting a precedent results in an outcome that's harsher than the standard punishment, does it serve justice? Or does it prioritize making a statement over fair treatment? As you can imagine, this case sparked intense debate, both locally and nationally, touching on complex issues that go beyond Cekic's actions alone. For many, the fact that Cekic had been arrested 23 times before this incident raised pressing questions about the justice system's effectiveness and the responsibilities of law enforcement and mental health services. How does someone with such a lengthy record remain free, capable of committing a violent act? To the public, this was a wake-up call, highlighting what some see as a fundamental failure to address recurring issues before they escalate. The controversy extends into the realm of mental health, as Cekic's actions and history suggest a potential need for mental health intervention rather than repeated arrests. For those advocating for mental health reform, this case exemplifies a gap in services and support systems for individuals who exhibit troubling behavior but don't meet the criteria for long-term detention or involuntary treatment. Many argue that cases like Cekic's underscore the need for preventative measures, interventions that go beyond the reactive approach of temporary incarceration. The patterns of Cekic could have been recognized, this going in and coming out and going in and coming out. And so instead of treating the crime, maybe they should have treated the issue of why do you keep coming back here? because all the tax dollars are paying for his stay in jail, but we're not doing anything and our dollars aren't really going anywhere to keep him from coming back. So, is it really helping? For those advocating for mental health reform, this case exemplifies a gap in services and support systems for those exhibiting troubling behavior. But maybe they don't meet the requirement, the criteria for long-term detention or involuntary treatment. Many argue that cases like Cekic's underscore the need for preventative measures. And you would think in the world today we would know them. We always are getting information about how to prevent this and that, and see the signs, and talk about this, and report that. Yet this doesn't change. So where is all that information going, and why isn't it causing any change? But there were others not quite so involved in the mental health question. Some members of the public feel that the focus on mental health and system failures is just a detraction from the severity of Cekic's actions, for example. For them, the victim, the fruit vendor, represents the individuals affected by an alleged system failure. Should public safety be compromised because resources were not available to handle Cekic's specific needs? Now, in this view, protecting the community is the top priority, even if it means placing individuals like Cekic under stricter supervision or giving them longer sentences. All in all, this case highlighted the fact that nobody seems to know where responsibility ultimately lies, and it can't be the same for every case. In general, is it on the justice system to ensure that repeat offenders receive mental health support? Or is it on the individual to manage their actions regardless of the struggles they are having? The complexity of this case has left people divided, and there are no easy answers. As the public grapples with these questions, it's very clear that this case has struck a nerve, forcing communities to confront their expectations of safety and accountability and care. One of the most significant aspects of the case is the public's sense of frustration with a system that often appears reactive rather than proactive. Critics argue that the justice system is not equipped to provide preventative care for individuals like Cekic, whose actions suggest a pattern that may not be criminal in intent, but they do become dangerous over time. When mental health services and the justice system don't intersect effectively, cases like this one can leave the public feeling that safety measures are lacking. Community members have pointed out that while individuals with mental health needs are often arrested for these minor offenses, these arrests don't result in any sustained care. There are no long-term solutions in them. Instead, each arrest becomes another part of the cycle. It's only temporary, without the intervention needed to prevent further escalation. On the other side, advocates for public safety believe that when someone becomes a threat to others, the priority should be protect the community regardless of the causes. This debate has also expanded into discussions on policy reform, with calls for a more integrated approach to justice and mental health. Advocates argue that the system should be capable of intervening meaningfully before behavior escalates into violence. Ideas range from court-mandated mental health treatment for repeat offenders to specialized programs that prioritize both care and public safety. For those following this case closely, the hope is that it could serve as a catalyst for broader change that might help prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. And ultimately, the controversy surrounding this case reveals the public's divided perspective on how best to handle individuals whose behavior poses a risk. Are we too lenient or too punitive? And moving forward, what steps can we take to ensure that the needs of both the individual and the community are met? As we come to the end of this case, I invite you to reflect on everything we've discussed and consider where you stand. We've examined the facts, reviewed the arguments from both sides, and explored the broader implications. surrounding mental health and accountability and public safety. The tragic incident involving Niser Cekic and the fruit vendor has left the community and the country asking tough questions. And now it is your turn to decide who bears the responsibility and what could have been done differently. Imagine yourself in this situation. A person with a long history of minor crimes and suspected mental health issues commits a violent act that leaves a community member injured. The legal system had multiple opportunities to intervene, but instead repeatedly released him, allowing a pattern of behavior to continue unchecked. So who should we hold accountable here? Should Cekic be seen as a threat who deserves to be punished? Or as someone failed by a system that missed opportunities for intervention? Some of you may feel that community safety is paramount and that repeat offenders, especially those who become violent, should be treated with strict measures to protect the public. In this view, it's essential to send a message that violent behavior, regardless of the individual's background or struggles, will not be tolerated. Is it fair to expect the community to live with a constant sense of uncertainty, never knowing if individuals with known histories of problematic behavior might act unpredictably? But on the other hand, others might argue that cases like Cekic's highlight the shortcomings of a justice system that relies too heavily on arrest and release without addressing underlying causes. If mental health care and support services were made a part of the process, would Cekic have had a better chance at rehabilitation? For some, the issue is not about protecting the community, but about preventing future harm by addressing the root causes of chronic behavior. After all, if the goal is a safer society, shouldn't we be investing in solutions that reduce recidivism and provide the support people need? And then there's the question of precedent. When a judge or legal authority decides to set an example with a particular case, they are making a decision that could impact future cases. But is it fair for one individual to be given a harsher punishment solely to deter others? In Cekic's case, some might argue that his mental health struggles should have been a factor, not an excuse, but an element that complicates the issue of precedent. If you were in his position, would it feel just to receive a sentence meant to send a message to others? And if it's up to the legal system to make this call, where do we draw the line between justice and making a statement? And if you did crime, do you have a say in any of that? Maybe because you did the crime, this is just an option for you, and that's too bad. I mean, in the end, we're left with the larger question of how to balance public safety with compassion when dealing with individuals who have repeat offenses tied to possible mental health issues. Today's justice system faces a difficult task, keeping communities safe while also acknowledging that some individuals may need more than just punitive measures to truly rehabilitate. Cekic's story shows us the risks of an approach that does not address deeper issues, but also reminds us of the importance of accountability. So with all these factors in mind, I ask you, how would you respond? Thank you for joining me in True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. As always, the legal system has reached its conclusion, but the real questions are left to us. Was justice served? Stay safe out there. Stay curious. Ask the questions. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.